Welcome in, Panthers Nation. Today we are closing out our three-part series where we're analyzing the first year of the Dan Morgan regime as a GM for the Carolina Panthers. So if you have not seen the previous videos, we analyzed his trades, we analyzed the draft picks, including a few undrafted free agents. And today we're going to look back at the free agent signings as well as the guys that he let walk and see how things panned out for the Carolina Panthers. So, without further ado, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to make this easy for everyone going out to Panthers.com, looking at their transaction history. You can do it too. Just makes it much easier for me. So, that's what we're going to do. No slides or anything official, but we will go through the list and I'll give you my opinion. So, we'll start all the way back. Again, today, we're really talking about free agent additions and some guys that walked. We already talked about trades. We talked about Brian Burns leaving, talked about Dante Jackson leaving. So for the purposes of this, we'll try to stay focused on the guys that were brought in and some of the guys that were released, which we'll get to in a second. So moving on away from Brian Burns, J.J. Jansen re-signed March 11th. Made sense. He's your long snapper, streak for most games in a row for a Carolina Panthers player by a mile. They also agreed to terms on the 12th with Amir Smith-Marset. A lot of folks were excited about that as we now analyze, knowing that Amir Smith-Marset did not make the final cut with the Carolina Panthers. We see him had a pretty successful year with the New York Giants as a special teamer. I don't know if this is a hit or a miss, considering, the Panthers were okay. They weren't great, but you do miss some of his playmaking abilities. And it really felt like at the end of, not this season, but the season before, that we started to see him come alive. All right. They then agree to terms with cornerback Troy Hill. We know Troy Hill eventually gets cut and let go during the season. The nickel cornerback was just a little bit too old. Also had Shaw Smith-Wade really step in and take over his role. As far as re-signing, in the moment it made sense. He had familiarity with Ejiro Evero, had a really good season before this. So I'm not going to knock, either of those. Also tendered running back Raheem Blackshear because he was an exclusive rights free agent. It's like, hey, we're going to sign you. You're going to come back. And that's it. End of discussion. We already discussed the trade with Dante Jackson and Deontay Johnson. We also discussed the Brian Burns trade. So we're not going to dive into that. Let's talk about the acquisition. So on March 13th, we'll actually start with this row of guys that were gone. Bradley Bozeman, Von Bell, and Hayden Hurst. So these were carryovers from the Fitterer days. Hayden Hurst ended up really doing nothing for the Chargers. Also not on this list because he was a free agent and they chose not to bring him back. DJ Chark. Von Bell, though, was a part of this scheme and system. I believe he ended up going back to Cincinnati. Y'all have to confirm. And then Bradley Bozeman. Bradley Bozeman had a really good year for the Chargers. They're a fantastic family. I don't know if you guys follow along with him and his wife. They even, when they came back to Charlotte, helped out in the community. I think it was part of a layover because they decided not to go back to Los Angeles. I mean, they're just really fantastic people. It wasn't a good fit for Bradley here as far as the scheme, just wasn't working out. But yeah, he panned out fine. So, I mean, for all these, I'm not going to really grade these, but I don't think that the Carolina Panthers were hurting by any of these. Maybe you make a case for Von Bell, considering how bad our safety room was. But let's talk about the additions. Robert Hunt, A+, hands down, one of the best acquisitions during the Dan Morgan tenure here in his first year, as well as Damian Lewis. You pair both of these interior pieces. We were wondering if this was going to work out, and sure enough, it did, and these guys paid dividends. Also, A'Shawn Robinson and Josie Jewell on the defensive side of the ball. I feel like the group of four plus DJ Wonnum were your best acquisitions of the offseason. But these four in particular, because they saw the field, they were impact players. And, we look at the offense and defense, they're probably four of the better players out of that group. Cornerback Dane Jackson was a total and utter flop. And I would not be surprised if we go in, unless he just vastly improves, if he gets cut going into the next season. So that's your roundup. Then things slow down. Remember, you have this big rush of signings. Then you slowly trickle in with guys. DJ Wonnum, initially, a lot of fans were excited. They're like, oh, this is, to me, I said this was the Brian Burns replacement, not Jadeveon Clowney. But DJ Wonnum comes in. We know he had the setback with blood clots, the injury, all that stuff. But when he was healthy and available on the field, one of the better players on defense, and I like the foundation that he's setting for the future. So really excited there. Jordan Fuller, complete flop. Absolutely just not good at all. And we saw his playing time diminish as the year went on. Same thing with Clavon Chasen. I mean, this was really just a shot in the dark, a former first round pick from Jacksonville. You're like, maybe we take a flyer, see what he can do. He just didn't pan out here, unfortunately. Josh Nijman, I give this, a solid grade. I'm not really grading these, I'm more or less talking through them on my opinions. Josh Nijman, very good signing. We saw him play a pivotal role at numerous times as a backup swing tackle. So really good addition on the offensive side of the ball. David Moore, another one, had ties to Dave Canales, really one of his guys. David Moore, of course, down the stretch, the Panthers weren't playing for anything, but he did kind of find his groove, especially as the wide receiver room got thin. He was able to step in and make a difference, and I would be in favor of the Panthers bringing him back. Nick Scott, not so much a hit as well. It feels like the entire safety group under a lot of scrutiny, a lot of eyeballs. Like we thought, you bring in some of Evero's guys, they're going to have a fit, but it was just a very bad year. Sam Franklin, we know, has suffered the setback, the injury. He is more of a special teams player, really didn't see the field. I know he's injured part of it, but even when guys went down and he was available, he didn't see the field a lot as a safety. I wonder, I know everybody loves him. I do too. But I wonder the value of keeping him around knowing that he's only a special teams player. I mean, that's really his primary role. Yes, you can go back and talk about, the interception, the return from like 2 years ago, but primarily in where he's been involved, primarily this guy is special teams ace. And there's value in that, but I think the Panthers really have to consider total upgrades. Jadeveon Clowney, middle of the road here. I knew we were not going to get the same production that he had in Baltimore. Baltimore was a much better team, much better production. So for me, yeah, this one was like, okay, I'm excited to see him. I like the ties to the Carolinas, but I'm not going to hang my hat on thinking that he's going to be a game wrecker and come in here and really just take things over. Foundational piece, but there's no doubt the Panthers have to figure out a plan moving forward at outside linebacker. Tay Davis was another one. He was more of a special teams player as well. I know he had some setbacks, didn't work out. I'm not going to knock the attempt to sign him and bring him back. We've already talked about the draft picks, so we're not going to discuss those. I mean, really, things slow down because then you're talking about Rashad Penny agreeing to terms. We know that never worked out. A bunch of guys released, including Tariq Cohen, Spencer Brown. These are a bunch of your practice squad guys. Chris Pierce, Jalen Camp, Il Manning, Raekwon Williams, and A.J. Parker. They brought in a ton of guys, undrafted rookies, Jalen Coker, quite the story. Damani Richardson, we've talked about, Andrew Rain, and even Jack Plummer, who's kind of, sat behind there for a little bit. Sam Pinckney, I was excited about. Harrison Mevis, I know he's going to be on a lot of radars next year, maybe not him specifically, but a kicker, no doubt, will be for the Carolina Panthers. And, from there, that was pretty much it. You have Cam Gill, TJ Smith, those guys, up and down a little bit during the year, waived a bunch of guys, and there really weren't. You had this XFL signing with Dawood Davis, and that was it, man. So, I mean, overall evaluation, Dan Morgan, I'd give him like a solid B+, maybe a B- overall. He secured spots that needed to be secured on offense for the offensive line. Defense got better in some places. Injuries hurt, no doubt about it, and you can't anticipate injuries. It's going to be a big year for him in the draft and free agency, and I think every position is going to be on the table for them. So anyways, folks, that's going to do it for your total recap. And I guess if I am giving a grade for Dan Morgan in his first year, we're giving him a solid B- for free agency, the draft and trades that he's executed. So really good start, a lot of room to grow. And I'm excited to have him as the GM of the Carolina Panthers, but this is an important draft coming up. As always, this is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.